Hey guys, welcome back to episode 5 of the weekly History Chaos podcast. Just want to tell you thank you for coming back and listening into another episode. Today's episode is actually going to be a little different than what I usually do. And what I mean by that is usually I have multiple topics and I kind of draw them out and everything. Well, today's episode I only have like 2 topics, but one's like really, really long. So I was like, well, that's probably going to be the centerpiece of today's entire episode. So I'll start with the smaller topic first, so we can kind of dive in. I'm hoping to keep today's episode maybe a little shorter. But the first topic I was going to talk about today is going to be last-ditch weapons. So in World War II, both Japan and Germany became very low on supplies. So raw materials, good quality materials, even just having good metal and things like that to build weapons of war became scarce and scarce. Again, bad with pronunciations. However you pronounce that. So pretty much there's a limited supply, but they still need a lot of weapons for war. You know, they needed guns and they needed bullets and they needed everything like that. So what the Germans did and the Japanese did is some of their main weapons, for example, the Kar-98, I think it's the Kriegs model, I think it's called. But anyway, the Kar-98K, which is like the most common rifle used by Germany, they actually ended up making last-ditch weapon designs of it. So what they did is they pretty much anything unnecessary, like bayonet holders, anything they could knock off these things. The butt stocks were like hollowed out, thinned out, shortened down. If they even had butt stocks, I mean, they took off everything off these rifles that they deemed was unnecessary for it to fire, like pretty much. They also used like really cheap shoddy metal and things like that. Like these were throwaway guns. I mean, these were not designed to use and take care of and clean. No, they were designed to use until they broke. They were like reusable guns. You go through them. They also done that with the Volkssturmgewehr, I think it's called. It comes out to like the people's rifle or the people's weapon or something like that. It's a semi-automatic rifles that were extremely cheap. I mean, they were used like they usually didn't even have a butt stock. They were used with like throwaway wood, if they had any wood on them, really. I mean, they were just like throwaway. They were terrible, like absolutely bad weapons. Just for example, I think the Soviets tested them out after World War II on some of the ones they captured, and at 100 meters, only 50% of the rounds actually hit the target. And these are talking about something where they're aiming it right at the target, lined up, and the gun is so off, like it's so badly made that the accuracy was just terrible. Now, were they able to make a bunch of these? Yeah, I mean they were pumping them out like crazy, but they're just really cheap metal. But that's just how far they were pushed to the edge. These weapons were made to literally be given to German citizens, children, women, old people. These were weapons made to be given to everyone because they were going to fight to the last man. So just kind of cool, like last-ditch weapons. So those two for the Germans. The Japanese had their own. Theirs would be the 99 rifle, the Type 99 rifle, which would be their primary rifle near the end of the war. And they also did the same thing the Germans did. They took off anything unnecessary. Some of them, they actually made versions without butt stocks, really cheap wood, anything they could to like get the cost of them down and the production up. And again, they were making these to supply as much as they can to their army and their people and everything because they were going to fight till the end. You know, they were going to fight to the last man, to the last woman, to the last child. Also, they did the Type 100 submachine gun the same way. They were going to make very basic versions of it with terrible materials, terrible supplies. Almost to the point of like making these things with like scrap metal. Like if you imagine that, like that's literally what they're doing. You could actually still see to get the steel, like the metal to form together, you could see the weld marks and stuff on them. I mean, like these were very crude weapons near the end of the war. Also, the Japanese took it a step further because they came up with the Lunge Mine, which I don't know if anybody here has played Battlefield 1, but it's actually in that game, and it's the Lunge Mine is pretty much a stick with an explosive charge on the end, and you would suicidally charge at a tank, and you would stab this mine into it, and the mine would blow up, hopefully knocking out the tank. You know, you'd aim for like the treads area, and you would try to do damage. Usually the sides of tanks are less armored, so you try to get in there. But it's suicidal. I mean, you have an explosive on the end of a stick, and you're running it into it. Like, Yeah. So, but that happened near the end of the war as well, like 1944. So there was a lot of like last ditch weaponry. But yeah, I mean, even with, if you look at like tank variants, plane variants near the end of the war, I mean, they were still, it would be the same model, but like if you look at like planes and tanks and stuff made at the end of the war compared to the beginning of the war, it's just the quality drops off, and it's because the lack of supply. They don't have the resources to properly make these things, so they're having to cut corners to have production be at the number it needs to be at to support the war. So yeah, I thought last ditch weapons today would be a fun little topic to talk about. And now we're going to move on to the major topic today, which is lesser known facts of World War II, minor nation additions. And some of these are territories. Technically, they're maybe not considered nations at the time, but my goodness, I went through the alphabet and there's a bunch. And I'll be honest, I have them wrote down right here because if anyone in their right mind could name all these off, they probably are like crazy, because like fanatical about this. But I actually wrote them down because there's so many, and I didn't really put very many keynotes, but I really studied this hard today because a lot of this was new to me. I knew some of it, but a lot of it was very new to me, and I was pretty interested in it. So hopefully y'all find it just as fascinating as I do. And at the end of this episode, I have one little tidbit of info that I'm probably going to do a way bigger topic about in the future. Just kind of some small info I didn't even know about, and it kind of plays into like some conspiracy theories today. So yeah, we'll get to that here in a minute. So minor nation addition, let's talk about it. So I'm pretty much going to go through here and kind of tell you what each nation did. And from what I've noticed they've done, just from looking up information, reading about it, like starting off here, example, Argentina, they declared war on Germany Axis. They gave 4,000 soldiers pretty much from the Argentina was in World War II. So a very small number of soldiers, but still something. There's a lot of nations that didn't contribute anything like that. Another cool one, Belgium Congo. They provided some troops and gold, and they actually provided the uranium that's in the atomic bombs that we dropped on Japan. So the uranium actually came from the Belgium Congo, which I thought was, pretty cool in general. Gosh, can't talk here. Bolivia declared war on Germany Axis. Most of these nations declared war on the Axis at the end of the stick of the U.S., United States at the time. You're not gonna. I mean, especially, and I will say this before I go further, because it's gonna come up a lot. Most of these nations declared war. They either declared war in 1941. Either they declared war in 1939 because they're related to Britain, and they did it right after World War II started off, or they declared war in 1941 right after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, to help out the U.S. and to support the Allied U.S. and things like that. Or they declared war later, which would be like 43 or 45. That's the two major ones. You see a lot of people declaring 43, and then you also see a lot of people declaring 45 right before the war ended. Okay, so going on from there, Bolivia declared war, supplied tin. Tin was a really important resource back then. Maybe not today, but back then tin was really important. Brazil declared 25,000 troops, and they gave up air and naval bases for the area. Well, they allowed construction and the use of air and naval bases in their country with the clause that after the U.S. was done using them, that the Brazil would get to keep them and have them. So they kind of got something out of the deal. They also helped out in the naval waters around Brazil and things like that, because the U-boat menace was really heavy in South America and the Caribbean, believe it or not. The U-boat presence was very heavy there. So a lot of South American and Caribbean countries helped out with that. Let's go to the next one here. Chile declared war and patrolled the oceans around it. And apparently Chile said that I don't know how much I believe this. So a report came out from Chile that their secret police, which I don't know if I'd brag about having a secret police, but that their secret police stopped a German plot in their country that was a plot to blow up a mine that was supplying key resources. And it was also a plot to blow up the Panama Canal. And Chile decided that they stopped that plot during World War II. Next on the list here is Colombia. They declared war, aka belligerency, which you're going to hear that a lot too. Some nations didn't really declare war. They declared what they call active belligerency against the Axis powers or Japan, which is the same as declaring war, but at the same time, they're not officially declaring war. It's kind of a weird declaration, but yeah. They patrolled the waters around their nation, helped out with the U-boat menace in the Battle of the Caribbean, things like that, and they also gave petroleum products. Not very surprising. Obviously, like Colombia, all these nations around there have oil, so yeah, they gave petroleum products. Costa Rica declared war. They didn't really do anything major. They seized enemy properties. You're going to see that a lot too. A lot of minor nations that could not really help with the war would seize properties. What they would do is anyone that was from Italy, Germany, things like that, if they owned property or land in their country, they would seize it. So they would be taking away value from Axis members and putting pressure on them. They would also usually embargo. They wouldn't trade with them. Another one on here, Cuba declared war, participated in the Battle of the Caribbean against the German U-boats, and they actually were very impressive. They did really good work. The U.S. actually brags upon the efficiency and how good the Cuban Navy was at the time. So yeah, they did really good work there. Dominican Republic declared war. They allowed volunteer fighters. You'll also see that a lot. Some nations didn't directly, but they would say, hey, if any of my people want to leave our country and go fight, and that's their choice, they can go do that. So they allowed volunteer fighters. Ecuador gave the Baltra Island Naval Base. That's really all they did. I believe they declared war, but I think that's all they gave, was just gave the island naval base. Egypt declared war, obviously. Kind of owned by the UK, kind of had to. They fought in North Africa, if that makes sense. Cool fact, though, about Egypt. So Egypt actually, you're going to notice with a lot of, especially the UK, like a lot of British-held territories, that when the enemy would get close to them, oh, my bad, guys. Sorry about that. Whenever, I know my phone's going to go off again. Let me silent it real quick. Yep, I knew it. It's my work phone. My bad, guys. Let me turn that off. Okay. So, little known fact about Egypt is that whenever, I guess any British country pretty much, whenever Japan or Germany or any of these countries were getting close to them, they wasn't really like, I guess worried that this was going to happen. They weren't like, oh my gosh, we're going to get invaded and taken over. They were actually pretty excited about it because a lot of these nations had been really sick and tired of being a puppet and being controlled by the UK and Britain. They were tired of being in the British Empire. But at the same time, a lot of these nations also realized that, the nations coming weren't any better. They're not better than the ones they had, the UK they had now. So there was a mix on it. Egypt actually had meetings and they were discussing swapping to help the Axis out if the Axis actually did get to Cairo and took over Egypt. So there's a lot of things like that that happened, but Egypt really did consider swapping to Germany's side if the Germans actually took over Egypt, actually got to Cairo, which they didn't. They lost. Another one on this list here is El Salvador. They pretty much declared war, pretty much removed access to their country to all foreign, like Italians, Germans. No one like that could come in their country. They also seized property, things like that. The odd thing is El Salvador was ruled by a dictator at the time, and he actually kind of liked Germany and Italy, but he declared war because he was scared of like the U.S. and stuff being so close. But at the same time, they didn't save him because his people overthrew him anyway. And yeah, so he ended up actually leaving El Salvador, going to, I can't remember the nation like right below it, but he went to that nation and they finally caught up to him and killed him pretty much. But yeah, he was a dictator. He's a bad person. And he actually liked Germany and stuff, even though he declared war on them. It was more like he had to. But yeah, all they did was remove people, remove Italians, remove Germans, things like that. And they seized property as well. Next on this list here is Fiji, which their biggest contribution was it was a major military port, highly used. A lot of traffic went through there. naval base, training facilities, everything. It was very important. You're going to see a lot of places like that their main thing they provided was a key location. Guatemala declared war, gave air bases. And obviously Fiji declared war because they're like a territory of the British Empire, so they had to. If I don't say that specifically, just let you know that happened. Haiti declared war. They provided food supplies and 5 Haitian fighter pilots who joined the Tuskegee Airmen. And if you don't know who the Tuskegee Airmen are, it's military pilots that were a military pilot group in the U.S. that were primarily African Americans or Haitians, or a mixture of colored people. But that was because segregation was very in the military back then. But that was their unit for the Air Force. Next on this list here, we have Honduras. They declared war on Germany. If I say declared war, it's none of these declared war on the Allies. Declared war, contributed food and raw materials, and sent some troops. It didn't specify the exact number of troops. It just said some troops. Iraq declared war, provided oil and logistics routes. Big surprise there, oil, But logistics routes are really important, being able to give so they could transport stuff to the Soviet Union and also through Africa and stuff like that. So logistic routes are really important through Iraq. Ireland's on this list. Ireland remained neutral throughout the entire war. But the reason why I included them on this list is because even though they remained neutral, during the, bombing raids that when Germany were doing against the UK, northeastern Ireland, which was, it's owned by the UK, they pretty much sent firefighters over from Ireland to there to help out with firefighting, obviously, but to kind of support that. And Germany, as a response to that, actually ended up bombing them because they said that broke their neutrality right there, just helping out the UK by putting out fires. But they never declared war. But the crazy thing is that the UK almost invaded them. Churchill put out a proposal to invade Ireland at the time, and they almost got invaded by the UK, which kind of crazy. Which, the UK, just for example, when Denmark fell, UK invaded Iceland. And that was under the pretext because they didn't want Germany getting it. And there's another reason why too, but I'll talk about that at the end. It ties to that other issue I want to talk about. Okay, next on this list, we're going to have Kenya, which would be like Central Eastern Africa kind of area. Kenya gave up 98,000 conscripted soldiers to fight against Italy. And due to segregation laws back then, these 98,000 soldiers were, primarily African Americans, and their officers were, white British men, if you believe that. So, yeah, because they were limited on rank of what rank they could achieve. But yeah, they fought a bunch over there. They fought Italy. They gave up a lot of conscripted soldiers. A lot of conscripted soldiers actually came from Africa. Liberia declared war, was a transit point for Africa, pretty much just because of its location. It was just a good transit point. They could move supplies north, south, things like that. Madagascar is actually on this list. It was a crucial harbors all along Madagascar. And another obscure fact about Madagascar, Madagascar actually got invaded by the UK, but not really like. It wasn't like there was really a battle. It was kind of like they had troops invaded to position there that way that, because it used to be a French territory, that way Germany didn't try to take it. Another really weird thing about Madagascar, because technically when France fell, technically Germany got hold of like all of its holdings per se, but not really. But Germany actually came up with a plan. They called it the Madagascar Plan. And what it is that I gotta get a drink, guys. 1 second. Okay, that's better. So the Madagascar Plan was a plan about the Jewish population in Germany, and their plan was possibly to send all the Jewish people in Europe to Madagascar. And that's just another one of those really crazy plans that came out of Germany. I don't know what in their right mind would make them think, if we put all the Jewish people on one big island, it'll work out. Like, obviously, logistically, it was not a good idea. Like, I don't even know how many ships, how long that would take. They were like, yeah, this is not economically sound to do this plan. Nor is it morally right to do this plan either, but, you know, we'll get past that point. Next on this list is going to be Mexico. They declared war. They allowed Mexican citizens to serve in the U.S. military. 250,000 U.S. citizens actually served in the U.S. military. They also supplied workers for farms. They had a big program for that in the U.S. where, you know, Mexican nationalists and citizens could serve either in the military or in farmlands, you know, to help out, you know, while our men were away fighting the war. They also supplied the most strategic resources to the Allies in general and the U.S. more than any other country. And they had a giant economic boom during World War II, and they actually led to a giant economic boom in the U.S. because they gave us so many resources that we turned around and used for war, like, you know, instantaneously. We owe a lot to Mexico in World War II. Let's see, next on this list, Nepal, the Kingdom of Nepal, declared a war. They fought in Burma against the Japanese. They supplied raw materials and equipment. They provided a lot of lumber, like a whole bunch of lumber. They provided weapons, equipment, and just overall, like tea. Like, I think it was like a ridiculous amount of tea, things like that. But they supplied a lot of that, and they actually their royal army fought in Burma. Nicaragua declared war, seized property. They didn't really do anything else that I can see on here. Nigeria fought in East Africa. 300,000 troops. Whole lot of Nigerian soldiers. Also back to that segregation thing. And this one's really surprising. Panama. They guarded the Panama Canal. That was their contribution in World War II. Big surprise. Some of these are really obvious, but like, I just never would have realized it was, like, I guess, listed down, you know, as contributions. But yeah, you know, that's what they did. I mean, it's vitally important. It connected the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean, so you had to have it guarded. And there, you know, it was, if it would have got taken out or destroyed or damaged, I mean, very well could have affected the war in a lot of ways. Paraguay declared war. They joined, their Air Force joined the Brazilian Air Force, fighting against the Axis. Peru declared war. Well, Peru declared war, but it's also back to that state of belligerency because, again, some of these nations that didn't really, they kind of had to do it, but they don't really have like a personal thing against Germany. So, yeah. They declared war, though, patrolled the Panama Canal, provided aviation fuel and oil to the Allies. Portugal. My mind will blank here. Portugal, they embargoed Germany, allowed fleeing Jews to enter. They embargoed tungsten, I believe, was the number one thing they did not trade to Germany anymore, and they didn't allow it to travel through their ports. So they denied tungsten to Germany, and they would let fleeing Jewish people that left Europe into their country, but they would not let them stay in their country. They would only let them go. There's a transit point, so they could come in, stay there a while, and then they could leave. That was like their only option. And a lot of nations would not allow fleeing Jewish people to enter their country, and or especially early on, like even the U.S. There was a lot of nations that denied entry. So it's really sad that there's a lot. Okay, next on this list here, we did Peru, Portugal, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia declared war, and they provided oil. Big shocker. Turkey declared war very late, like the very, very, very end of the war. They stayed neutral most of the time. They kept trading with both sides. But when they declared war, they finally halted trade with the Axis. They didn't send them any more chromium or anything like that. Puerto Rico, Puerto Rico is technically a U.S. territory, but Puerto Rico had 65,000 of their citizens, or Puerto Ricans, serve in the U.S. military, which is really, really impressive. Uruguay declared war, did nothing major there that I could find. Venezuela declared war against the Axis. Vast oil supplies were given to the Allies. I think that about wraps it up. Yeah, that pretty much wraps it up. That's everything I have on there. I will say this, there is one other small one that I didn't have on there, but I listed off. Lichtenstein, that nation. They're a very, very tiny nation in Europe, like teeny tiny, near Switzerland. But they allowed Jewish people into their country, but only if they could afford to enter. So they better have money. So they allowed wealthy Jews to stay in their country to avoid the Germans. So yeah, that wraps up that topic. The final topic that I want to talk more about, maybe in a future podcast soon, is going to be about Antarctica, which I did not know was such a hotbed of activity in World War II. So apparently, like Argentina, Chile, Germany, the US, the UK, all these nations were setting up bases in the Antarctica, like claiming land and territory because they didn't want anyone else to claim it. And just kind of odd, back to that whole invasion of Iceland thing, is because they wanted to be, they wanted to have forces near, and they wanted to be able to go to Antarctica. Germany went to Antarctica before Norway could because they thought Norway was going to claim land. The UK claimed land. Chile and Argentina both claimed land. Chile and Argentina actually claimed land that the UK already claimed. I don't know. There's a whole fiasco. And then it's kind of weird now because, technically now, Antarctica is, off limits. You can't go to Antarctica. It's illegal. No one can go there. And it kind of makes you wonder, all these nations back then, 45, 44, all during World War II, they were fighting neck and neck with each other to claim land in Antarctica, and it makes you wonder why. What kind of, it goes into that conspiracy theory, what's so valuable in Antarctica they want to claim it? Are they really just claiming it to protect it, or is there something valuable up there? So, yeah, I just thought that was an interesting bit. Maybe I'm going to do more research on Antarctica, and we can really dive into it in the future and kind of see, why it's a conspiracy theory and why it was such a huge ordeal back during World War II. Other than that, this was a decently long episode, guys, for 2 topics, or 3 topics, however you want to name it. I want to tell everyone thank you for coming to check it out. Sorry if I slipped up on any words or stuttered or anything like that. This has been a stressful week, and I feel a little under the weather. But hopefully everyone here enjoyed episode 5. Give me a follow on TikTok. I'm DOSBear, on my YouTube DOSBear. This podcast here is on Facebook. It's on Instagram. My DOSBear account's on Instagram as too. Yeah, follow me anywhere you like. Leave me a review. I love to hear feedback, to know how it is. If you don't like something I did in an episode, let me know. I'm not going to get mad about it. If you got to give me a 3-star rating to tell me I did something wrong, give me the rating on it. But yeah, hopefully y'all check my podcast out and like it. Watch my previous episodes if you can. Other than that, this is episode 5 of the Weekly History Chaos podcast. And y'all have a fantastic, great week.